Good afternoon, everybody. Phil Simons with Columbia Grain here in your Friday afternoon weekly grain market recap. Well, we actually had some fresh fundamental data this week as the quarterly stocks numbers were released on Monday, which really kind of set the stage for us. But let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen with you and we're going to navigate over to our favorite website again, columbiagrain.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, go to the Producer Solutions tab, which will take us over to our Producer Solutions link. But again, as I mentioned here on Monday, this week, we actually started out with a quarterly grain stocks report for the U.S. And in all reality, the numbers were actually, when we compare them to last year, the numbers were actually significantly higher than where we were last year at this time. When we look at corn, we're actually 29% above the numbers that we had last year. Soybeans, 30% higher than this time last year. And wheat, we were at 12% higher than this time last year. What really kind of took the market by surprise was the numbers that were actually released were a little bit lower, actually quite a bit lower than where the average estimates had us coming in at, or where the average pre-report thoughts had us coming in at. So that's really what kind of took the market more by surprise than anything else. And also, when you look at the overall potential production or the production for the U.S. Wheat crop this past year, up a little bit. When we look at all wheat classes, all winter was actually up 8%. Hard red winter wheat was actually up 28% from last year, while soft red was down 24%. White wheat was actually up 19%. But then when we look at Durham was actually up 36% from the same numbers that we were looking at last year. So again, kind of both sides of the complex here when we look at things that could have been supportive and also things that could have put additional downward pressure on the markets. And that's really, quite honestly, how we wound the week up here. When we look and see what actually happened week on week, when we look at Chicago D-Sweet, we actually closed the week up 10 cents. Kansas December was up 22 cents. Minneapolis Dece was up 33. But when we look at corn was up for new crop, was up 8 cents when the dust settled today. And November beans were actually down 23 cents week on week. But I actually wanted to look at a little bit, wider spectrum in terms of what we've seen in overall price ranges. Since we did come to a quarter end on Monday, kind of wanted to see what we saw and the overall ranges for corn, wheat, and soybeans. So if we look at just the quarter three ranges and changes, so if we look from June 3rd through September 30th, we can see what the actual ranges were for the quarter. We look at new crop corn at December 24 corn, the overall range throughout the quarter was 93 cents. And the net change was actually a loss of 43 cents when the dust settled on Monday. When we look at soybeans and really the wheat complex, we actually had some very sizable ranges. When you look at the overall range for November beans, we actually had a range of $2.30, which is pretty significant. And we look at the overall change, we actually were down $1.26 on the quarter when everything settled out on Monday. When we look at the wheat complex, similar fashion to soybeans, right? We have Kansas City had a $2.33 range, and the overall change was actually down $1.62. We look at Chicago wheat, we had a $2.22 range, and actually wound the quarter with a net loss of $1.39. And we look at Minneapolis, we had a $2.17 range there, and actually wound up losing $1.49 on the quarter. But then again, when you take a look and step back even further and say, okay, where was the high and where was the low, right? And where did we close? In all reality, on corn and soybeans, it actually did come off the lows, pretty nicely, and actually kind of, closer to the middle part of the trading range that we saw in both corn and soybeans. The wheat complex, we actually did have a fairly decent bounce, but still trading closer to the lower end of the range that we saw over the last quarter there. So again, just trying to highlight the importance of getting your orders out there and working, specifically, now looking at more new crop than anything else as well, because we are getting to some fairly attractive pricing points for new crop when we look at Kansas. September 25, along with Chicago September 25. So definitely don't take your eyes off that as we get closer and closer to wrapping up seeding and everything else, because now that the seed's in the ground, we do really need to be looking forward to the opportunities that we have for new crop, looking at September 25 futures for hedge to arrive contracts, accumulator contracts. Some of our cash plus contracts as well have been getting some pretty decent attention. You can get a pretty decent little premium right now when you go that far out. So be sure to get a hold of your local managers and your buyers and go over all the different options that we have for you in the Columbia Producer Solutions tools and platforms. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up for the week here. I hope everybody has a safe harvest. Don't let the greedy bird mess on your shoulder. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk with you next week.